As of 1st of August 2020, source ccpc.ie for Ireland's lowest rate over €20,000. An Post acts as a credit intermediary on behalf of Avantcard DAC. An Post trading as An Post Money is authorised as a credit intermediary by the CCPC. Avantcard DAC trading as Avantcard is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The doors of the National Gallery of Ireland may be closed for now, but you can still step inside with National Gallery of Ireland at home. Take a stroll through some of your favourite spaces or enjoy an exhibition with a virtual tour. Listen to podcasts, watch family workshop videos, shop in our online store or just browse and enjoy. To experience all of this and more, visit nationalgallery.ie.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. cwe.net.
Now you're welcome back. We have Liverpool, Arsenal at Anfield. Mark Lawrenson on the line. Good evening.
Evening.
Before we get too much into this game, and I don't want to get bogged down in handball hysteria, I am curious though, when you were playing, were they always messing around with the handball rule?
No, definitely not. I don't think it's anything like what it was. I think you really seriously had to, handle it properly, not just be hit with it if it was ever going to be a penalty. And I think if you saw the Roy Hodgson interview on Saturday after his game against Everton, that's what exactly he was saying. And, the likes of Steve Bruce and all the other managers had come out and really just quoted what Roy Hodgson has said.
So when you were playing, if the ball hit you, would you turn to the referee and say accidental? Was that kind of the vibe?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the referee would make his own decision up anyway, but definitely. I mean, it's one of these things now with VAR. I think this is a major problem. They look at these incidents, but they look at them in slow motion. It always looks worse. It's got to be real time, and in real time, you would disallow the penalties that have been given, or the majority of them, because it's very difficult in many cases to get your hand out of the way. Occasionally see it, and it's absolutely totally deliberate, and everyone will agree on it. There's the odd occasion where you think, well, some will say yes, some will say no, but these things they're doing at the moment are just utterly ridiculous.
They will have to change the rule here, really. So it would seem that they've taken interpretation or discretion away from the referee. The rule refers to the body being unnaturally bigger, but it takes away allowances for the speed at which the ball is travelling or how close you are to the ball, all of these kind of things. So on the one hand, they've taken away discretion, and then with VAR, it now forces the referee to go over and look at pretty much every incident. So they're in a quandary there.
Well, they're in a quandary, and it puts the referees under even more pressure, obviously. I mean, the one on Eric Dyer at the weekend was just utterly ridiculous. I mean, for Steve Bruce, who nicked a point, to come out straight away, the first thing he said was, well, we got lucky, because no way was it ever a penalty. The refs have a hard enough job, as everybody knows, but to put them under even more pressure, it's a little bit kind of Pontius Pilate by the guys who make the laws. I can't remember, are they called FIBA or whatever it's called, obviously, in relation to FIFA, and these guys have never obviously played football before. I think what's interesting as well is Arsene Wenger's somewhere up there now. I presume he's probably with UEFA, and he's probably looking at offside at the moment. But, just to get, why don't they go to people like him, Sir Alex Ferguson, all these guys, and say, right, what do you think we should do, instead of these pen pushers deciding, well, this is exactly what the rules are going to be.
So Anfield then this evening, Liverpool against Arsenal. You always seem to have good contacts with what's going on at the club. What's the general feeling around Liverpool at the moment?
Well, they'll be extremely delighted with Leicester 5, Manchester City 2. There's no doubt about that. I think they found that to be a real bonus as well. I think they realised as well tonight's a different proposition with Mikel Arteta in charge of Arsenal. He's got them organised, playing with a back three, of which one is David Luiz, who basically can come out and maybe try and stop Firmino tonight and stop Liverpool at source. But generally, Liverpool have always won these games, especially at home. We know about the thing with no crowds, and I think it does help an away performance. And don't forget, the last team that played at Anfield was Leeds, and they scored a few goals. So I don't see Arsenal playing like that, but I do think they will press in midfield and make it difficult for Liverpool. They obviously beat them in the big game the other month, so they'll be kind of buoyed in terms of confidence. But I think very much Liverpool and the manager look at themselves and think, if we play well tonight, it will take a very, very good team or the odd VAR decision to beat them.
They do seem to have that kind of assuredness about them now, Liverpool, don't they? Not least having won, they talked about the Champions League really fueling belief in the side. I noticed a few of the players did that last year, and now they go and win a Premier League. And they just looked like champions against Chelsea. It was just a routine dispatching of... I mean, well, I was going to say a very good team. West Brom managed to put 3 past them. There are issues there. But still, it's Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and it was just routine for Liverpool.
Yeah. I think it was men against boys. I think they just basically kept Chelsea at arm's length. Obviously, we saw Thiago come on at half-time, and to be quite honest with you, he could have played in his slippers and his pipe. It looked so easy for him. So there's no Thiago tonight, which is unfortunate for Liverpool, because... I think they've absolutely stolen him, and people say, well, hold on a minute, he's 29 or 30. But with these lads now, they play for another 4 or 5 years. Just look at people like Ronaldo, etc. I think he's been a masterstroke in the signings, and even Jota, because he will, at the start of the season, when all the players came back for the start, and the front three will be looking around the room and saying, Origi, one or two others, Curtis Jones, they can come in and play games. I don't think they'll start regularly, etc. And then Jota walked through the door. They're kind of thinking, oh, hold on a minute, who's he been signed to replace? And it's that kind of pressure when you start the season after winning the league, which is exactly what you need, just to put everybody back on their toes.
Are you impressed with what Arteta is doing?
Yeah, I am. I think, obviously he's not that long out the game. We know the fact, he was at City with Pep Guardiola, so he will have learned a lot. I read something this morning, I can't remember which paper it was in, but he's recently taken the Brentford set pieces coach onto the staff at Arsenal, because he said, you know what? He said, well, all the things we analyse, and he said we've got so many analysts, but at the end of the season, you can score an awful lot of... Well, by the time you get to the end of the season, you can score an awful lot of goals from set pieces. This guy from Brentford, whose name escapes me, obviously is somebody who's very, very good. So, he's ticking every box. He's got the team playing well. He's obviously made a decision on Ozil, which is no thank you very much, and maybe one or two others. And it's not particularly bothered him. And in many ways, it's not been his problem, because he didn't sign them. He didn't give the money in terms of the wages, and he'd just gone cut them off, which I think is a sign of a good manager who just back himself and say, no, I've got my players, you don't fit in. If you want to get yourself a move, get yourself out on loan, good luck, go and do it.
Aubameyang, Lacazette and Willian's probably been a very clever signing. He's going to settle in straight away for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I was reading a piece as well actually this morning, and it was talking about Arteta's preferred method of football, and they were citing the Fulham game as well, and how direct at times Arsenal are. It's not long ball direct, but it's really direct. Apparently him and Pep have a slight difference of opinion there. Pep's happy to go side to side quite a bit and hold on to the ball. Arteta wants a team to get forward with the ball pretty quickly. I mean, they cut Fulham to shreds. What's a kind of realistic ceiling for Arsenal this season, do you think?
I think they can challenge for the top 4. I mean, there will no doubt be occasions in the season where we go same old Arsenal, and they've probably lost 3 or 4 on the spin and lose, away to one team that's down at the bottom of the league. But I would have thought under Arteta that won't be as regular. Yes, he's got them playing a different way, certainly. But I think, when you say about the thing with maybe fallout with Pep at City about the way they played, I mean, they had a certain fella called Kevin De Bruyne and a guy called Aguero up front who could just conjure stuff out of nothing, which as good as the front 3 at Arsenal now are, they're not particularly great in midfield. So I think he's assessed the situation, and he said, right, I've got 4 people in there, work extremely hard, backwards and forwards. Basically, they're carrying the bricks for the 3 boys up front, making them the chances. And you'll think with Aubameyang, Lacazette, etc., and Willian, who's you rightly say is a really good signing, they will create and score lots of chances and goals this season.
It's starting to look a bit iffy at City, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, if it weren't for the fact that the 2 guys that basically run the football club, the 2 Spanish guys who obviously waited for Pep Guardiola, he would be under pressure straight away at the start of this season. The way they went out of the Champions League, obviously the way as well in the league, there were so many points behind Liverpool, lost 9 games, didn't sign a replacement for Vincent Kompany. But I don't know if you saw on Saturday there was a big, long interview with Guardiola at the training ground, and he was almost kind of morose. Now, I know, unfortunately, I think he lost his mum, didn't he, through COVID, etc., in the lockdown. But it was, the journalist suddenly realised that he didn't seem to be that bothered about talking about football, and the journalist kind of said to him, well, you've got to get off to a good start and things like that. And he just went, well, he said, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? The journo kind of went, what do you mean? He said, well, I'll get sacked. If I don't win football games, I'll get sacked. He wouldn't have been anywhere near that 2 years ago. No. He would have come out with the whole kind of diatribe about, this, that, and the other. And he just looks as though he's lost his spark. It may just be he'd had a bad day. It was his 16th interview, and he basically couldn't give an SH1T in terms of the interview, and just thought, I'm just going to say this. But it didn't really appear that way. I didn't come across that way.
No. And this is the first time he's gone 5 seasons with the club. He is somebody who's, has taken sabbaticals and burns himself out and needs to step away. So yeah. It's hard to know. I mean, you can obviously, as you said, you can read too much into it, but sure. there's some. I mean, the way they went out to Leon was desperate, and on his part, unfortunately, in a big way, his decision making, and there just looked to be problems all over the place yesterday. Yeah.
And they've lost the guy that would get them out of jail on so many occasions, which is Aguero, who score a goal out of nothing. And Jesus is a good player, but when you're Kevin De Bruyne on the ball, he ain't Aguero. He's not Aguero who's going to find little spaces and really kind of sort of, in terms of the chances, scored nearly all of them. So that's an issue for them. You're right about Leon. I thought it was a really poor idea. He probably had too much time to think about that game, in all honesty, and trying to be a bit too clever, which I think was something that was kind of levelled at Pep when he first came over. So it's I mean, to lose 5-2 at home against Leicester as well with your first home game after beating Wolves and playing brilliantly in the first half, you kind of look, well, what is it with this team? There's something fundamentally wrong. Yes, they may be missing 1 or 2 players, but they weren't too far away from one of the strongest teams. So I think that, the next few weeks for them are going to be extremely interesting. It
seemed against Leon he was setting up, and the overthinking point is probably spot on, but he was setting up to protect that back four. And yesterday in front of Garcia and Aki, he went with Fernandinho and Rodri. It's like almost he's lost faith in what he can ask his team to do at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact to play 2 guys in there who fundamentally just, hold the position, get the ball and pass it, but pass it quite sort of easily was a strange one. Listen, this goes back to not dealing with the fact that the new company was going. Vincent Kompany was going a long time before the end of the season, and everybody knew what a fantastic player he'd been for the football club, and yet Pep was a little bit kind of almost, well, yeah, he's been great, but you know what? The way we play, the way we get forward, the way we create loads of chances, does it really matter? Yes, it does really matter because, if you keep clean sheets in games and you've got, outstanding forwards, you'll win the majority of your games you play.
Any strong theory as to why we're seeing so many goals in the opening couple of weekends?
I think, a few things. I think the games are just a little bit more open because there's not too much pressure on players anymore because they're not there to get any stick from crowd, etc. I think the referees have been a lot more lenient with tackles, and therefore I think the game seems to. I'm not quite sure how long everyone has a stat about how long you actually play football. But in most of the time, a lot of the time, it's out of play and throw-ins and goal kicks and all those kind of things. But there seems to be more end-to-end football, and I think everybody's just going for it a little bit because they know they're not going to be slated actually on the day by their supporters.
That's interesting. Really? So not having the crowd there potentially, the crowd would have put manners on the players when it came to their work rate, and then secondly, players might be more liable to try something because they're not going to get the groans afterwards.
Absolutely, totally. Most definitely. There's no real pressure. You might get a little bit of stick from your teammates if you tried a 50-yard pass when quite a simple one was on. So you still have to deal with that a little bit. To be honest with you, when you watch these games, most of them feel like glorified friendlies. And it's very, very difficult to reciprocate the fact that there's no players. I mean, tonight at Anfield, hold 50-odd, 55,000, and it is just so different. And I just think it's you can't fake not having any crowd. I think, and we know that some of the crowds in terms of it's kind of canned in and stuff like that, but it's not obviously real. And I think the referees thing's a big thing. And the other thing I noticed as well, players have stopped diving generally, but then they've absolutely totally stopped diving because. You dive with 50,000 people supporting you at home. You got a better chance of getting a free kick. It's human nature. I think that's gone. I think that's one of the great things.
Yeah, your point on the crowd is probably very true. Like you forget it because on the Sky Sports main channel they obviously pipe through the crowd. But if you flick over, I did it the other day. I flicked over to the Premier League channel, and that's where you get the natural effects. And you suddenly, I generally been watching it on the main channel out of habit, and then you flick over and you realise how dead the whole thing is, and that's their reality, so it must be having an effect. So, Liverpool Arsenal then 8 o'clock kickoff. I mean, if City are having a wobble, you're looking at scraps really as to why Liverpool can't kick on and win this title again. I mean, Van Dijk complacency, making mistakes he wouldn't usually make. Even I don't believe that as I say it. There's no real reason why they're not going to kick on here, barring a disastrous injury run.
Absolutely. And the thing about, obviously, the first game against Leeds and how good were Leeds and how well had Bielsa done his homework in terms of the way you need to play against Liverpool, they won. The bottom line was they won. They weren't very, very good. And if you saw at the end of the game when Klopp was mouthing wow, I think he was mouthing wow as into the way that Leeds played against his team, not the fact it was what ended up 4-3, wasn't it? So, they won't be sat in there thinking we win this tonight and we're definitely going on to win the league because they know what can happen. But just looking around at the other teams at the moment, you can't really see anybody stopping them. It's not just a case of Liverpool will win it. No one else can stop them at the moment with what we've seen. No,
it certainly looks that way. Next up for Man City, he has Bielsa waiting for them. They have Bielsa waiting for them, so that could be interesting.
Yeah, very. I love him. I could just sit and watch him all day on his sponsored bucket. He's just completely barking mad, but you can just tell every single one of his players would run through a brick wall for him. And that's when you've got that as a manager and you've got good players, you're a long, long way to being a really good side.
Yeah, well, they're well on the way. Mark, enjoyed the game. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Mark Lawrenson there, Liverpool, Arsenal, Anfield, 8 o'clock kickoff.
The Future Proof Podcast.
Have you ever given money to a complete stranger? Or donated a part of your body? On this week's Future Proof, we ask why we do these things at such great cost to ourselves.